Welcome back to First Light. I'm your host, Chris Keller. Today I'm joined by my friend and law partner, Blake Swan. Blake's career is defined by decisive moments when he chose to leap instead of standing still. From passing 3 bar exams on the first attempt to building a multi-state firm that fights for clients across the country, Blake has never been afraid to jump when the opportunity presented itself. And now he's captured that spirit in his new book, Jump. It's a guide for anyone standing at the edge of a big decision, a reminder that progress doesn't come from hesitation, it comes from action. In this episode, we'll talk about Blake's own leap into the law, the lessons he's learned building Keller Swan, and the message behind this book that can inspire you to take your next jump with courage and purpose. Let's get into it. Today, I'm joined by Blake Swan, my good friend and law partner, and I'm excited to have you on this episode.
I'm excited to be here, my man.
So let's get started. So for those who may not know you, I know a lot about you. Obviously, we got to know each other really well over the last couple of years, but you have a great story and how you've kind of taken over the world. But more importantly, now just grown this amazing firm, and I'm just lucky to be your partner. But let's talk about growing up in Connecticut. Let's talk about kind of how you got into being a lawyer. I love the story about how you became a lawyer, so let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, I grew up a big family in Connecticut. Obviously, when you're the youngest in a big family, it becomes that competitive environment. I've always had that competitive spirit to me. It was actually, there was an attorney I knew in Connecticut who, when I was young, I would get in a little bit of trouble, if you could believe that. I know that probably surprises you, Chris, but I would get in trouble on occasion. And there was actually an attorney, and it was something we did that I actually that was part in some way, but it was not the main culprit. And I realized that, kind of getting labeled as, the troubled kid or the kid that gets in trouble, I was immediately pointed as, he did it. It was me and my buddy that they pointed out that we were responsible. And we were getting kicked out of, so I was a competitive sailboat racer growing up, like very competitive sailboat racing. And we were getting kicked out of sailing, me and my buddy. And his dad happened to be a Marine and also an attorney. And I'll never forget, we went to like a little hearing, and his dad, stood up for us and, was an advocate for us. And, ultimately at the end of the day, we did not get kicked out of sailing. And for some reason, the 2 people that were labeled as the good kids, they were not, subject to any scrutiny. They actually were the ones that did all the bad things, right? So I realized in that moment that, being an advocate for somebody could be a really, really powerful thing. And it really, really inspired me and pushed me to, be able to help people in whatever way I could. And naturally in the personal injury field, I get to do that all the time. So I graduated from law school in D.C., and it was during the Great Recession at the time. And there was a firm down here in South Florida that I applied for, and they called me on the phone, and they said, "Hey, when can you interview?" And my personality. I said, "I'll be there tomorrow." And they said, "Well, how is that possible? You live in D.C.?" I said, I'll drive right now. So I hopped in the car. I drove down. They hired me on the spot. I flew back. I rented a U-Haul, and I've been here ever since. That was 15 years ago. So that's my journey to becoming a lawyer. That's my journey to getting into personal injury law.
Well, let's talk about the entrepreneur side. I know you came from a family of entrepreneurs in some ways. So talk about the spark of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so that was always been a passion of mine. My wife will tell you I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started many businesses over the years and learned from a lot of mistakes throughout them, and I've done very well in some and made mistakes in others, right? Like that's I think the common theme you'll hear from every entrepreneur. So my dad was actually, believe it or not, owned a chain of funeral homes. So the Swan Funeral Homes, where there's I think 6 or 7 of them on the shoreline in Connecticut. And, when I was in high school, he had actually sold out on his funeral homes. But my dad was an entrepreneur. He was a police officer first, and he was a firefighter. He actually took over his dad's funeral home. It was a family business. He was like 3rd or 4th generation. It went way back. And, of course, we're built similar. It went from 1 funeral home to 7 in a pretty quick period of time. And, before you knew it, he had pretty much a control of that market in the shoreline. So, I was always around that growing up, always around my dad, who was really interested in creating, really enjoyed servicing people. He actually, believe it or not, really enjoyed that profession. Being with people like in the worst of times, which is a lot of what we do as personal injury lawyers, is not very different. And I would hear him in those conversations, and I was around him with those conversations. So I think I always had a passion for it. It was what can I do in my career, in my life, where I can provide that level of support. And my dad, I would argue, is the best at it. And one day aspiring to catch up. So he was very good at it. So when I was working for somebody, which never quite felt natural, especially like in a true employee-related environment, I would feed that in various ways, right? Like that little passion. So before you know it, I owned a real estate portfolio. Before I know it, I owned a boat rental business. Like you name it, I was constantly doing things, and luckily, some of them did very well for me, which truthfully allowed me to open up my own law firm and take that jump. And that's really what the book is about. The book is about making that leap from a traditional employee 9-to-5 job into a life of entrepreneurship, which is really requires you to live in a state of faith and trust, as you know, and it's not easy to make that jump, and a lot of people get paralyzed in it, especially when you're making a really good living. You got kids, you got a mortgage, money's coming in. Everything on paper looks amazing. Everybody's telling you how you're crushing it. Your parents, hey, oh my God, why would you ever leave? Why would you ever do this? And here you are. You're like, I'm miserable. I'm absolutely miserable, stuck in this box. And I realized I was trying to create an empire in a box. And that was when, I finally, through a lot of working on myself, a lot of confronting limiting beliefs, a lot of shadow work, where you're realizing that your projections on other people are things that you either need to own in yourself or part of you, right? And through that journey of working on myself, changing my relationship with alcohol, as I know you have as well, I was able to find the courage to do it. And somewhere along the process, fear became the roadmap as opposed to the barrier.
Well, you jumped ahead of me with coming out with the book. So let's talk about jump and your jump to write a book. The first to make a decision to write a book is a challenging decision, and then two, to actually write the book is as you've learned now, a very hard thing to do, and now you're at the place of publishing. It's getting ready to come out. So talk about the decision to write the book, why write the book, and ultimately what you're hoping to teach people in the book Jump.
Yeah, look, as I made that big transformation in my life, like really, working on myself and, putting myself in a much better mental place, what I found is that I started surrounding myself with people that pushed me and inspired me and pushed me into things that I wanted to be, as opposed to push me into somebody else's vision of what they wanted from me, right? And one of those people was you. And, we were at EOS, and Chris mentioned that he was going to write a book. And I'm sitting there, and I went home that night, and I'm like, damn, I want to do that too. And I really did. And I really enjoy business, as you know. Nobody enjoys business probably as much as me. I enjoy the nuances of business just as much as the broad spectrum of business. And I was like, I've learned a lot in the last couple years about all the things not to do and some things to do. And I could teach and I could really help people in the process to making the mental shift you need to be able to make a jump. But then also the practical components of it. So that's what ultimately inspired me. I think I've always enjoyed coaching, teaching, and helping other people grow, because I've had people in my life that have done the same for me.
What's the key story or theme of the book that you really hope that readers will take away from Jump?
Yeah, I think the key theme is that look, we all view the world through a lens, and the lens is often created in our childhood by agreements that we made about ourselves. And in order to make a jump, that's a jump of faith into believing in yourself, and ultimately believing that God, the universe, whatever religion, has your back, and you're going to make mistakes. And instead of viewing those as mistakes, you view them as growing opportunities. If you can make that mental shift, which is not easy to make, and really own your circumstances in a very, very powerful way. Understand that everything is happening for you and is a gift in some way. All your traumas, all your past stories, if you really analyze it, they can be true gifts, but you can allow them to cripple you. And if you can make those mental shifts, which I guide through the jump method, you can really find a much clearer pathway to your dreams. And then ultimately, when you get there, what are the practical steps that are going to guide me through this? How am I going to do this? Like, especially as attorneys, we're not taught any of this stuff in law school. We're not taught how to run a business. We're not taught numbers. We're not taught, what are the different ratios that are important to look at in a business? What does gross profit really mean, and what does it signify within a business? How do I make sure I'm profitable, and learning that profit is a discipline, and how you run your business with discipline is ultimately what results in a profitable business. And so I run through a lot of the practical steps of this is what you need to do in order to be successful running a business, because at the end of the day, we all know cash doesn't lie. And through periods of growth, Chris and I have learned that the hard way, and learned how to adjust and what to look at and where to make adjustments, and become more efficient and ultimately more profitable in the process.
Without giving too much away, what is the jump method?
Yeah, so the jump method is J is justify your why, U is uncover limiting beliefs, M is a mindset shift, and then P is the planning. And that's really the part of the book that goes into the practical steps of business that you need to understand in order to be successful. And there's all of them are important. I think Tony Robbins said, and I'll probably get the ratio wrong, that business is 80% mental. I would agree with that. It really is. I mean, there's going to be trials and tribulations throughout it, and you're going to have to find a way to go back to your why and understand why you're doing this in the first place, and ground yourself in that, and to be able to push through to build what you ultimately want to build. I think Elon Musk said it best. Running a business is like eating glass and staring into the abyss, and then you're crazy enough to do it again. But for some reason, I love it. I love every part of business. I love the ups, the downs. I'm appreciative for all of them, but it took me a long, long time to get there. And the version of me 5 years ago would not be able to get through some of the trials and tribulations we're going through right now, right? So it requires you to grow as an individual too.
So I don't know too many attorneys that are licensed in more states than you. So talk about how you've gone into these different markets, and you really became an attorney and handle cases in Arkansas, Mississippi. I'm going to miss some states. I know Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, Arizona. How have you really kind of expanded your business and grown your business?
Yeah, so interesting backstory was I was working at a firm that was doing litigation work for another firm, and the firm that was sending us work decided to expand into Tennessee. So I had got licensed in Tennessee, and young lawyer went up, took the bar exam, and then of course what happens when you're in Memphis, Tennessee, is Arkansas is right there, and you start getting Arkansas cases. And so before I knew it, I was taking the Arkansas bar exam. And so, a lot of bar exams in a short period of time. And then, I started, what happens when you start doing multi-state is, there's key differences we learn in law school. There's kind of minority and majority approaches to a lot of things, and you start learning that the same differences exist in state to state, and then a lot of practical experience doing it. And before you know it, I'm living in Florida, and I'm primarily handling Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas cases, right? And I kind of got branded as the multi-state guy. And I understand that multi-state PI probably better than most out there, because I did it for a long time. And before you know it, you become kind of the resource for multi-state. Hey, because I practice in Tennessee, I know people in Kentucky, I know people in that region of the country, and a lot of people reach out to me to guide them. Hey, I got this case, where should I go? And I know who's good in each market because I practice there. But I've always enjoyed being the multi-state guy. I think everybody is looking for their niche, right? Like, what is it? I friends with a guy up in Connecticut who all he does is train law. He only does train cases, and he does very well with it. My niche is a little broader, a little bigger. It happens to be that I'm licensed in a lot of states and tend to understand the laws in most of these states very, very well, just because I've done it for a long time. And me, I like to research. I like to learn the little nuances. So I've learned from trial and error and from doing it a long time. So that's how it started. And then when I went on my own, it was interesting, right? Here you are, I'm living in South Florida, I'm making this jump. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I understand Tennessee law probably is better than I understand Florida law. And I'm living in South Florida. So I decided, I also understood that, case acquisition costs and, some of the key financial metrics that enabled me to and pushed me to make the decision. But I decided that I was going to immediately expand into Tennessee and do some advertising in Tennessee. And as crazy as that sounds, most people, when they leave and they're a solo guy, they're like, hey, I'm going to get some word of mouth cases. I'm going to try to get some referrals. I was like, nope, we're going to dive right in. And thank God it worked, right? And I started acquiring, a lot of Tennessee cases, and found myself spending a lot of time in Tennessee during that time, and then naturally, Mississippi and Arkansas followed, and Georgia soon after that. So, and then before I knew it, I was probably the smallest firm in the country that was spread so wide geographically, but it worked, and through the process, now we've grown and we've got some really good people in all those jurisdictions, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy going up there. I enjoy the Tennessee people. I enjoy the Georgia people, and it enables me to kind of immerse myself in that Southern culture, which is obviously different from down here.
One thing that I always talk about with you and is that you've changed and grown so much in such a short period of time. Going from your own firm to joining forces with us, and then once we joined forces, just the massive growth that we've had. Not to mention that you're married, you got a 7-year-old, soon to be 8-year-old. You have a newborn, not newborn anymore, just celebrated a year. It's crazy to think. Writing a book, all these things that are going on. And so, how have you managed all those changes in your life at the same time?
Yeah, look, it goes back to the jump method, right? It goes back to, you really need to know your why. You got to know why you're doing every little thing you do in this world, because if you don't, you're going to quit and you're going to give up. And it's really easy to do that. It's easy, and this is a controversial thing, but I believe burnout is a mindset. And it's a mindset when you're doing a lot of things that your soul is not meant to do, you're going to hit burnout, right? But if you're spending your time and pushing yourself in things that light you up, that inspire you, that you believe can inspire other people around you, it's really easy to do. And that's the truth. And there is no burnout in it because you enjoy it. And it's not, my wife laughs at me and because I play golf and I love sports and I love working out, as you know. But my passion is business, right? Like, so when I'm working on business, when I'm working on writing a business book, when I'm doing all that, I'm enjoying myself. So when you live in what I call my book, and it's there's a famous author that came up with this term, when you're living in your zone of genius, where your passions meet your unique strengths, it's not hard. and it's actually very, very enjoyable, and the process is very enjoyable. Where I find myself getting in burnout in life is when I shift away from those things, when I'm doing those things that is not within my zone of genius. And then the key is sometimes in life, unfortunately, you're forced to do that, right? Whatever it might be. And the key is trying to shift back and figuring out, is there ways to delegate those tasks that take you out of that sweet spot. So
what do you think the biggest lesson you've learned over the last 2 years? Because I know your story so well. I think when we merged, we were around 20-something, 28 people maybe or so, 30, and now we're at 80 plus. And so just this massive growth. And we, as you said, we got things right. We've made some. I don't like to call things mistakes. I like to call them learning opportunities. So we've learned a lot. We've had a lot of opportunities to learn.
Growth trials.
But what do you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned over the last couple of years and all the growth that you've experienced?
Yeah, I think it really goes back to the jump method, and a lot of it is really owning your circumstances, right? There's going to be, I think Jocko, he says that when a lot of people will come to him, they'll come with something bad, he'll say good. He looks at him dead serious, good. I'm not quite there. We're gonna get there. Usually it's the next day though. So I'm getting closer, but it's really owning that, and it goes beyond your circumstances in your personal life, but in your business life, and when you really kind of own everything and treat all those things as an opportunity to get better, to learn. It's amazing how your entire world shifts because everything becomes an opportunity. Everything becomes a stepping stone to be better. And that shift from victim mindset to creator mindset, if you will, has been a really, really powerful one. And it's something I constantly working on every single day. And I'm getting better and better and better. So I think that if you ask me, what is the big thing I've learned within the past 2 years is when I'm in that tough spot, when you're in that place, is go back to the simple question, what is this teaching me? And when you go back to that question, you shift your perspective. And when you shift that perspective, it opens up an opportunity to grow, be better. And if I didn't have that and hadn't started learning that, I don't think we would be where we are as a firm. So that's the big thing. And it's been an ongoing lesson and an ongoing practice, if you will.
There's going to be a lot of people who will listen to this episode and maybe they're on the verge of some big life decision, whether it's, a relationship, whether it's, career change, whether it's starting that business. We're all, facing life decisions at a point. What's that, piece of advice or maybe that first small jump that you would tell someone to make today?
Yeah, I would really analyze what you're afraid of. I think fear is can be a very powerful thing, but it's how you internalize that fear and what you do with that fear, right? Are you using that fear to cripple you, or are you using that fear to inspire you? Because if you're afraid of something, it means it's important to you. If you're afraid of losing somebody, if you're afraid of making a jump, whatever it is in your life that you're fearful of, there's a meaning behind that fear. And if you can lean into that fear, I think you're going to find where you need to start, right? For me, there was a big fear of leaving, massive fear. Like, what am I doing? This is insane, right? There was a lot of people in my life that told me that doing that was insane, right? Like, you're leaving this very steady career, you're making good money, and you're going to make this wild, crazy jump. And I was so fearful of it because it was so important to me, right? To be able to build something that was what I wanted, right? Which was very different than what the owner of the firm I was at wanted. And there was nothing wrong with what he wanted. And it was up to me to own my circumstances and lean into what I wanted in life. But it was the fear that led me there, truthfully.
Whether it's with your family, with your business, with other businesses, what are you trying to create? What legacy are you trying to leave?
I I think at the end of the day, we always talk about, and you and I share a very, very, very similar vision, and that's why it works, right? It's you want to inspire positive transformation in people. That was the point of the book. You and I do it in different ways, right? Yours is very health and wellness focused, which is so important, and it's a big component of it. Chris is the person that inspires the people at the firm to, push to be healthier. He's pushing people to be better personally and professionally every single day. What really inspires and pushes me is helping business owners, right? Like those entrepreneurial minds, which I believe there is an entrepreneurial mind. It's a drive that some people want, and it's part of their existence and who they are. And if you're an entrepreneur, my vision is to be able to inspire those people to lean into their fears, to create, ultimately what they want to create. And so, I think, my legacy, if I leave this earth one day and I can look back and I inspired other people along the process to chase their dreams, to lean into what they were afraid of and do things that they never thought they were willing to do, and they lie on their deathbed knowing, you know what, I left it all out on the table. That's a pretty powerful place to be. So yeah, I think that's that's the legacy.
What were the early experiences in your life that you think kind of shaped where you're at now, where that's the legacy that you want to leave?
Yeah, it's interesting. You'll start learning that your why usually is traced back to something that happened in your life, or some part of your childhood that shaped who you are, right? And my childhood was amazing, right? I had two amazing parents, but they were very similar to most parents, right? The 9 to 5, the steady, that made them comfortable, right? Of course, that makes them comfortable. And you're going to have people in your life where certain things are going to make them, really comfortable. I think because of that upbringing, I went to a college or even a high school where everybody went to college, and everybody wanted to get that great job, work that 9 to 5, and they come in that pattern of like, this is what you're supposed to do with your life. You're supposed to chase the paycheck, if you will, of somebody else's paycheck. And I think somewhere along that journey, I just realized that's not who I am, even though that was the lens that was created for me. It was safety. It was a lens of safety and comfortability, and living. My wife says that I live in discomfort every single day, and I thrive in discomfort, and I chase discomfort, because at your edge is where you grow. So I'm trying to chase that discomfort every day in whatever way possible, and that's what keeps me alive, and that's what inspires me to push through. So I've successfully pushed through a lot of those limiting beliefs.
What do you think? You've accomplished so much in your career, with before you even started the firm, you've accomplished so much, but now, since having the firm, you've accomplished so much, and then at home, you've accomplished so much. So what do you think you're most proud of over the last couple of years of what you've accomplished?
Yeah, it's easy. My relationship with my family has changed entirely. Our stories are similar. I was, in a stage of my life, unfortunately, I think a lot of lawyers get into this stage. It's very common in our profession. It was in a stage where, I was drinking, and, you're going out all the time. You're not present because you're living in your head 24/7. And you lack that presence with your family. So the thing I'm most proud of is, as I've done this work on myself, as I push to do things that are in my zone of genius and that don't feel like burnout and don't feel like, wow, what am I doing every day? You can come home and be present and be happy. And what that translates to is a better relationship with your wife, a better relationship with your kids, a better relationship with everybody in your life. And through that process, you're going to lose a lot of people in your life too. And I think that was the hardest part probably. As you grow, you really do. And I think you hear it on YouTube podcasts about these guys that talk about it all the time about, you end up, shedding a lot of people in your life. And it doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you don't care for them. But as you go to different places, so will the people that you attract. So I'm very, very proud of the relationship with my family, and extended to that is the people I've attracted into my life since making these shifts.
So when can we expect the book? When's the release date? Are we close?
So we're looking at, I guess, the end of September, beginning of October. I'm hoping to have a firm date here very, very soon. But it's coming a lot faster than I thought. I can't believe it seems like yesterday I decided to write it, and now all of a sudden we're designing covers and we're getting ready to ship it out. So end of September, beginning of October. The book is called Jump, and the main premise is how do you leave your 9 to 5, fulfill your purpose, and then when you do that, what are the practical steps that are going to guide you through the process? So, these were the things that helped me in my journey, and really hoping it can help some other people as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me on First Light finally, and for sharing hopefully one of many interviews that you'll have on the book Jump.
I appreciate it, man.
Blake, thank you for diving deep with us and sharing not just the lawyer, but the thinker, the doer, and now the author. Jump isn't just a book, it's a blueprint for stepping into uncertainty with purpose and optimism. To everyone listening, if you've been hesitating, the leap doesn't have to be giant, it just has to happen. Blake, thank you for diving deep with us and sharing not just the lawyer, but the thinker, the doer, and now the author. Jump isn't just a book, it's a blueprint for stepping into uncertainty with purpose and optimism. To everyone listening, if you've been hesitating, the leap doesn't have to be giant, it just has to happen. And Blake's journey reminds us the smallest step in action can become your biggest story. Remember, when your life asks you to move, give it your best. Keep showing up, keep moving forward, and keep shining your light.